Welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast, now part of the Work Defined Podcast Network. Join us as we explore the vital role of compensation, strategy, data, and people analytics in navigating today's complex business world. With the resources of Work Defined, we're bringing you deeper insights and actionable ideas from top HR experts. Now, here are your hosts, David Turetsky and Dwight Brown. Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I am your co-host, David Turetsky, alongside my co-host, best friend, partner in crime from salary.com, Dwight Brown. Dwight, how are you?
David Turetsky. I'm good. I'm great because we've got Steve with us today.
That's my line. Steve Brink.
You guys quit fighting over me, would you?
The man, the myth, the legend, Steve Brink, my favorite boss ever. No offense, Dwight.
Come on.
Steve Brink, the best first boss a person could ever ask for. Steve Brink, how are you?
Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great. As we were talking in the preamble before the show, we were doing great. We have way too much energy this morning.
A little too much sugar, a little too much caffeine. I'm your podcast people today, audience.
Exactly. People are going to be like, wow, they're wound up. But before we get into all that fun stuff, Steve, give us an update as to where you are now, what you're doing.
Sure. Sounds great, David. And great to be with you guys today. So I actually retired, but then...
How many times is this now that you've retired?
No, I only once.
It's not new news.
Only once. And so it's interesting because I'm kind of now leading as a CEO of a new and up and coming kind of organization that's been around for 10 years, but it's a little known secret. And it's a little known secret because it's a collection of different companies in the US, Canada, UK, Switzerland, South Africa, and Australia, New Zealand. And we're expanding that. But those individual companies have been working together kind of as a referral kind of nature around the area of executive compensation and governance issues. But what they saw was there's a huge opportunity for a new and up and coming company that's truly global, truly independent, and truly strategic. And so they've made an investment now in the company that I'm the CEO for, called GECN Group. And we're all coming together and we're kind of creating some synergies across the organizations and intellectual capital and producing all sorts of new studies and other things to really address the global nature of executive comp as we see, and the impact of how that talent is executive talent is becoming critical for all companies, especially larger companies. And us having a portfolio that's truly global can bring in local expertise, but with kind of global synergies.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's the only reason why I came out of retirement, Dave, because I wouldn't have come out of retirement. You know, I was enjoying the beach and the sunshine, but if there was one role that came in, this was a really appealing opportunity for me to take and kind of to go into my last part of my career here and do something I think is really passionate about, and something that can really make a difference for organizations around the world, around the area of executive comp and governance.
You're only about 35. What are you talking about the last step in your career?
Not that young. I wish I was. 35 years of a career, maybe. But, anyway.
Wow.
Young at heart.
Exactly, at heart.
There we go.
So, Steve, what's one fun thing? We've had you on the program before, but what's one fun thing that no one knows about Mr. Brink?
Boy, one fun thing. Dave, I have so many fun things that I can't select it from it.
You'll try.
You know what? I love going out and
line dancing?
Actually being on the ocean.
Yes, you had a boat. You sold your boat though, right?
I sold it recently and looking to get potentially another one.
Well, I heard dinghies are available.
Yeah, no, this would be a little larger than that, but no, anything from whale watching to just being on the ocean and feeling free and open, and also I started fishing a lot more this summer.
Nice.
And actually was part of the Martha's Vineyard fishing derby, and
Wow.
I got 2 weigh-ins. So anyway, no
Wow.
places. Though.
Nice.
So you're going to turn into a merman, is what you're saying.
That's right. Exactly. Something like that. No,
A
I still like
merman.
being on top of the boat.
Merman. Oh,
Anyway.
okay. All right. Well,
Anyway.
yeah. Okay, Captain.
I love it. I still like being on top of the boat as opposed to under the boat.
Yes,
Under the
very
boat.
much so.
Well, which is what
That's right.
happens when I get on, it capsizes, and then we're both under the boat. People are like, hey, get that walrus off that damn boat.
God, whatever.
So the topic for today is one we really haven't touched on a lot, but it's an extremely important one to every corporation, especially public companies. And that's the world of executive compensation and what's going on with it today.
Hey, we're the Payroll Baddies, and our mission is to make payroll fun and relatable.
And call out industry when we hear it.
You gotta call it out. You gotta call it like you see it. But we also gotta shine a light on all those unsung payroll heroes out there, making sure we get paid.
Yeah, those are the real payroll baddies out there, and we love sharing their stories and showing them love.
With gold chain and everything, baby.
By the way, SAP is the best payroll out there, and if you don't like it,
Get out.
So, Steve, the first question is, now that you're in the CEO role at GECN, you said that you have a study going on CEO pay trends. What do you think, and I'm going to take a little more of a historical approach because you've been in the world of compensation a long time. Tell me about how executive compensation has evolved, and then let's talk about the trends for today.
Yeah, I think Dave, there's been so many different changes, but what our study that we've kind of recently done, and the full report's coming out in the first of the year, but it's just how much the U.S. Pays a premium versus the rest of the world. We've done the study across the globe. GCN is very global, obviously, with the different exchanges, and we've kind of collected all that information to look at the comparison. And U.S. just pays a premium, and it puts a lot of pressure on other organizations around the globe to kind of sort of keep up. And obviously, with the the hyper competitiveness of talent, everybody's looking for that executive talent that's going to take them to the next level. This just puts more pressure on boards across the United States, but also across the world.
So, do you think it's really then, in that case, either greed, or is there something magical about the executives in the U.S. that they're just getting paid so much more?
Yeah, it's interesting because when you look at it, and this is in the report that people can be able to access here shortly, is that when you look at the U.S. pay, even though it's paying a premium, the organizations actually have higher returns. So if you're actually paying based on returns, it's actually more aligned in terms of what you're getting back for that pay and executive compensation. So that's one area there in terms of that. And it's David and Dwight. It's pretty amazing for me anyway to see the use of performance shares, for example, is now dominant across the globe. That was not the case before. Still some variety, but in terms of just the reliance on true pay for performance, which always talked about, but instead of moving away from really time-based, equity and grants, et cetera, and moving more performance, it just puts more pressure on boards to say, are you using the right performance metrics that you want in your organization? And that becomes a real key for the long-term success of the organization.
And so this is a relatively new trend then, where, you think of the horror stories of something going wrong with a CEO, and they're still walking away with $100 million, even though the company has gone downhill. So is this in reaction to some of that?
Well, I think in fact is that the pay for performance is probably, or the disconnect of pay for performance is still the number one reason where say on pay has an issue.
Okay.
And so I go back to what I just said: is those performance metrics, are you actually measuring those right metrics in terms of what we're trying to do with the organization? Do you have them right? And not just constantly, I said it before, but the boards are under pressure. And in addition to that, is that when you look at, for your saying about succession planning and the shortage of really executive talent that you're trying to find for your organization, is that when you have that hyper competitiveness, is like succession plan and retention and those issues become even greater, because the cost when a CEO leaves for good, bad, or in different reasons, it's a huge cost to the organization in terms of their success. And so when you're looking at that, it's like, even now comp committees are increasingly called, the HR committee or the people committee or whatever. It's getting away from just compensation. It's a broader talent or executive talent issue, which now boards are becoming more interested in, for lack of a better name, than they've ever been before. So if there's one trend on that, it's the broader part of what the mission of the comp committee is. It's about that holistic view in terms of performance, executive talent. Are you sourcing the right talent? Are you getting the right talent? Because it's that hyper competitive. It's no longer just a pay issue. It's the overall talent issue for executives.
The critical concern that I think Dwight's pointing out, though, Steve, is that because executive pay is public, very public, and of course with pay transparency, everything is public, really. But executive pay comes at a premium, obviously, from a transparency perspective, because especially for public companies, the top 5 need to be listed in the proxy statements. But it's also the case where the multiples that the CEOs are getting, or the C-suite are getting, on the average employee, the average worker, which is also a statistic that's usually quoted in proxies, those ratios are ridiculous. I mean, let's call it what it is. They're getting paid way too much relative to an average worker. And, you're talking about succession. To be able to get someone ready to being the C-suite, they have to go through lots of leaps in their career, but also they have to go through lots of leaps in their compensation to get there. And there just aren't those leaps anymore. A lot of the people that are coming in laterally from other places. So we're really not setting ourselves up for success from a succession perspective by grooming people inside the organization. We're really just hiring from the outside. And I'm going to get back to my compensation statement in a second, but I think Microsoft was that key example of, they found the right person, but it took them way too long to get that right person, because they had not groomed, or they had not done their succession planning as effectively.
Yeah, and I think that's the exact point that I was trying to make, Dave, is that the board now is more interested in making sure the grooming of the next leadership cadre is there, because you can't keep on spending money by bringing somebody from another organization over and paying out, significant, pay. And so if you can do that and have a more, what's the, we talk about the only long-term sustainable advantage that any company has is their people. People can replicate technology. They can replicate where you're doing production or where you're working. They can do all of that. But when it comes down to it, the only long-term sustainable advantage, competitive advantage any company has is their people.
Unless they start replacing people with AI.
Well, okay. Well, that's a different conversation, Dave. We'll have that podcast too. But in terms of that, it's like, It's like, well, of course, the board now, I think, is under pressure to recognize that and having a broader edict, if you will, about that comp committee. It's no longer just, pay. It's about the broader nature of talent, executive talent in your organization. It's not just looking for tomorrow, it's looking down the line. Because again, Dave, when you look at it, when people think about the cost of the organization, when somebody hires somebody that's from another entity, whether they're Machiavellian or not, there's going to be change. There's going to be people upset in that current organization that have a lot of intellectual capital and knowledge of the organization and how it works, the culture and everything else. Are they going to stay or are they going to go? So it's this ripple impact of this that's also key, but also vice versa. If someone, you have, the next generation, you have 5 key people and you're going to promote one, what happens to the other 4? Do they get upset and they leave? So this whole element around the pay issue around that talent succession is key because you still want to keep them. Those people, the 4 that didn't get the top role, what do you want to keep those other 4 as well? So it becomes this much broader discussion from the long-term sustainability of an organization and the success of the organization. And I think boards are stepping up more than they've ever done before, which is great to see.
Well, so even that example that you just gave, which is a great example, whether it's 5 people in the succession plan, 1 gets promoted, or you bring someone in from the outside world, that means there are 5 pissed off people.
Yeah, well,
didn't get the job. Yeah.
Potentially. Exactly. And so at least you're mitigating that risk, right? And if you put incentives into these up and coming executive talent, well, I mean, are they going to potentially leave, or are they going to be satisfied with that pay and what they did? They didn't get the top role, but there are things that could be helpful for them in the organizational success.
Well, what we've seen is career is more important, and making sure that they understand what their status is and being transparent and honest with them about their status, about being that next in line, and being able to give them clear opportunities to be able to grow to become that person if they want it. So it's not even just, are you going to pay them enough? Are you going to give them enough performance shares or restricted shares or options? It's money. Are you going to give them opportunities to be able to prove themselves to be that next successor?
Right.
To me, that's the real key.
And that's an excellent point, Dave, because in some previous studies that I've been associated with is that just the executive talent is truly global now than it's ever been. In terms of that, so you have this pool of talent that's global in every country. It's no longer, you used to say, when you look from the moon to the earth, you don't see the lines of the borders more. It's the earth. And if you look at that, if that is actually the labor market, it's much broader. And so I know some organizations I worked with under previous organizations where they required people to work in multiple, geographies or continents. Before they got the top role, because they needed to have that more global experience. Because again, where are they going to get their growth from? Is it going to get the growth in just the United States? No, it's going to be these emerging markets and other markets that we're going to have to go after to really get the revenue boost and the profit boost of those entities. So sourcing talent differently amongst the borders, if you will, is a key component to that whole succession plan and what boards need to be looking at. It's just not sourcing a U.S. company is looking at an American to run it. And we've seen a lot of examples of that where we're bringing people from other areas of the globe.
Not only the depth, but you need that breadth of experience to be able to understand the organization from multiple perspectives, understand what the push and pull are or is in different areas. And we do see that a lot with organizations where they don't do that. They're just recruiting somebody from, even if it's not the US, it's another country, and they come in and we see it where they struggle and the organization struggles because they don't truly know the organization, even though they think they do.
Enjoying the conversation? Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode packed with insights and strategies. Now, let's dive back in. Let's talk about some of the compensation components that you're seeing trending. Like you had mentioned, that you're seeing more in the way of performance shares as a way of being able to drive the relationship of performance and compensation, especially for the top levels. Let's talk about comp a little bit and where you see other trends happening. And I'd love to talk about performance shares because that's one area that I think a lot of organizations tend to miss because they're either going to SARs or options or back to restricted stock awards.
Yeah, I think in terms of, the surprising thing is just the mix. It's just we always thought like UK and US really led on performance shares first and alike, but now that's been ingrained in across the globe. And I'm looking at here just the statistics, and it's like I mentioned, it's pretty universal. Time versus performance, especially at the CEO level in terms of the data that we're talking about. It's like it's pretty much 60% across the board minimum that people are using performance shares as opposed to time. And so that's a huge change.
So you're talking about performance-based vesting relative to time-based vesting for restricted shares and options, right?
Yeah, actually correct. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And going back to your earlier point as well is that for performance vesting, then you have to figure out what is the appropriate measures that we're going to put on those vesting rules, because you can just pull them from wherever, but they have to be relative to corporate strategy, right?
Well, that's the whole alignment, right? And that's why, I mentioned about the disconnect between pay and performance, about say on pay. That's why it's a real issue. It's like, what are truly the corporate goals for the stakeholders that we're trying to achieve with the organization? And are those performance measures aligned? And do you actually have them, that's, the whole SMART goals, in terms of that they're aligned to actually the pay for the performance vesting. And that becomes key. And that's again, a lot more pressure, right? To make sure, do you have the right metrics? Because again, you do what you're measured on. All of us do, right? If we're going to be measured on revenue, well, by golly, we're going to do things that's trying to boost revenue, and we're going to do other things. So it's got to have that well-balanced portfolio to make sure you're addressing the performance issues that you're that's going to make the long-term success. It's interesting, Dave, because where GCN has a lot of mining companies, material companies and alike, which is huge right now. It's going, with, the price of gold and platinum and silver, et cetera. And it's interesting when you look at those, is like, we all think about short term, right? Everybody says, well, executives are focused on the short term. Well, this is changing because when you really look at it, it's actually the long-term goals are there. And one of the things in mining, if you think about mining, the investments that they have to make in opening up a new production site, a mining site, it's a huge. So does the CEO, they'll probably not get the return on if they decide to put something in, Australia somewhere. Are they really going to see the return under their tenure?
Right. But that's,
right.
But that's a cyclical thing. You're always making investments today for return tomorrow, and you get judged on not only the short term, but you get judged on the long term, because those investments, when they pay out, that's not a short term investment. That's something you've been not just budgeting for, but you've been hoping for years, maybe even decades. So but that's
correct. But that's but if you focus on terms of that measure, in terms of what that executive is being paid, that return, that they're making a decision of a huge expense now, that they're not going to see the benefit of that in their tenure.
Yep.
And so one of the things that we're seeing is do you lengthen out the period of time for those long-term incentives so that there's even better alignment with what you're seeing on the return of those those huge investments, those infrastructure investments that will be key. So these are kind of the interesting things about, again, lining, because you're better off. The company's going to be better off by making that huge infrastructure investment longer term, but it doesn't necessarily is going to be good for that personally for that one CEO. So how do you align that in a better way? And that's where we're working with mining companies to be able to address those.
Yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily extend the life of a share-based program too much beyond 10 years, because then it loses its effectiveness. Whereas, and I think what you're talking about is performance over time and needing the balance, the long term versus the short term. And I totally get that, and I totally agree.
Yes.
And that's also the reason why we do annual grants for executives. And we don't know if that executive is going to leave within the next, year, 2 years, 3 years. Typically, they have longer time horizons. But the reason why we don't typically do more than 10-year grants, as far as I remember from my youth in executive comp, was literally because, you've got to call it sometime.
Right.
And 10 years sounded good. And the 3-year, whether it's a 3-year cliff or a one-third, you're basically giving them the opportunity to have a 3-year horizon, and then any decisions on the 5-year horizon get dealt with within that grant. But still, that's the 1-year grant, and you're going to have multiple grants over time, and they accumulate over time, and as well, they compound over time too, to an extent.
Right.
So we do take care of the long term by not just this year's grant, but the multi-year grant. Right? I mean, am I not thinking about that right?
No, I think you are, but yeah, I think you are, Dave. I mean, it's just, but I was using that as a very differentiated example of trying to balance the short term and the performance as opposed to the longer term benefit of the overall organization. Where do you strike that balance, which puts a lot of pressure again on boards and advisors to make sure, are you striking that right balance of that short term versus long term performance, because things are going to be, decisions need to be made for the long term, not just for what we're going to get tomorrow. Yeah,
I agree.
And that's where there's a potential shortfall. If that takes a lot of investment of time and understanding on the comp committee and other individuals within the organization to really kind of study that, parse that out, and make that determination of what makes the most sense, what makes the most business sense for the organization, and what makes the most sense for the CEO and their decision making. And so it really just underscores the fact that you, to your point, you've got to have the right metrics there. But in order to get to the right metrics, it takes a lot of time, effort, and blood, sweat, and tears to actually get to that point, and advanced planning, Yeah,
and Dwight, I want to go back to something that Steve said before. You have a couple of issues on the time horizon. First of all, when is that person going to leave? When are they going to retire? When are we going to have that next person who has the opportunity from the succession plan to step up? And so some of what Steve was also talking about from a time horizon perspective is the knowing that someone else will need to take the reins at some point, because nobody lives forever.
Right.
And just like Mr. Brink has shown, people do retire. I mean, they change their mind, but they retire. And so, this is a multivariate equation of trying to drive the boat, having the new captains in the wings waiting to go, but being able to pay that person who's driving it today enough to keep them straight and true, but then to prepare those people around them to understand that trajectory and be able to fill in when that person does get heaved off the ship. Going back to Steve's example of being on the ocean and getting thrown into the, oh no, that was me thinking that.
Yeah, exactly. Like the old man in the sea here.
Old man in the sea, or Moby Dick.
David, got to get you out on that boat. I might be throwing you over with the whales there.
What happened to Teresky? I don't know. He never came back from that trip he took with Steve.
That's right. And did you know there's more great white sharks in Cape Cod than there is in any part of the world?
Yeah, so you ain't getting me around the cod. Cape
No,
Cod.
Dave,
Yeah.
really, come on the boat.
Yeah, exactly.
Gets me
When
out.
Steve invites you to go swimming, it's
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
really an
Yeah,
invite.
I've got this really cool new bathing suit for you, David. Yeah, it does look like a seal, but don't worry about that. So, Steve, our third question is other trends that you saw in your study when we're talking about a global nature of executive pay. If I asked you, is the US driving executive pay? You said yes. I asked you that before. But what are the other things that if you looked at your study that you could say, what are the major trends around the world that are kind of affecting executive pay?
Yeah, when we look at again, the study we did was not longitudinal, but so it was a snapshot. But in terms of, I go back to about the performance is the one that we already talked about, so infinitum. But it's really the when you look at the pay mix across the board, pretty much it's the reason if you look at US and if you do it by sector, including the tech sector is actually really key on this. It's the long-term incentive programs that really drive the big differences. When you look at salaries, when you look at short-term, they're relatively the same. I mean, relatively, it's from a benchmark. It's really the long-term incentive amount that's really drives sector differences. It drives geographic differences and the like. Some are more conservative than others. If you look at Australia or whatever in terms of more on the salary and bonus side. So there's just that was probably just another trend, and I just see that with the U.S. leading, if we're really talking that it's a truly global labor market, everybody's going to have to catch up to, because you're rising to the level of where benchmark is. And there are some examples where an executive talent in the UK moves to the US to run a US company,
right?
Because they're going to get more pay. And if you look at it, the second, if I remember right, the second pay is Canada. Now, why is second Canada? Well, Canada's even more influenced by the U.S. It's still two different countries, but it's so close, and that talent is very mobility there. Yeah. It's like it's catching up. So if we're seeing that's going to happen more and more, it doesn't go to the lowest common denominator; it goes to the highest. Denominator, if you will, and that's what puts pressure on how do you do this with different local governance issues, regulations on taxes, pay, those type of things, taxes. And by the way, we actually did separately to our friends at Air Inc. Use cost of living and their tax information to see. To apply it to see, does it actually change that the U.S.'s premium, given the tax situation, right, given the cost of living, given even the currency changes that have happened over the last year. It's been a lot. If you look at the U.S. dollar versus others. Right. And yes, it does mitigate it a little bit, but there's still a premium for the U.S., even accounting for cost of living and the costs that we have here in the U.S., the taxes, as well as then the currency changes that we have in that we've seen gone on. It's just it still sets a huge premium.
So, Steve, I'd love to talk to you about this forever, but unfortunately, we have to go. So I think we need a round 2 on exec comp trends and maybe double click into some of these issues a little bit more as it gets closer to publishing your GECN study. How about that?
Sounds great, Dave. Appreciate it.
Steve, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Been great to see Dwight and Dave, and look forward to seeing you guys again here shortly.
Yes, well, if I'm not wearing that SEAL costume and being on your boat and getting thrown over, we'll definitely do that.
Just jump in the sea and flail around. That's all you got to do this run.
That's right.
Exactly.
Make a lot of splashes there, Dave.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Why are you putting chum all over me?
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dwight.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us, Steve. Always a pleasure.
All good, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you for listening to the HR Data Labs podcast. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share it with your network. Also, check out the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch every Friday on LinkedIn. You can also check out the recordings on Spotify. Thank you, take care, and stay safe.